Could Georgia leaders have a place on President-elect Biden's cabinet? Politico is throwing out that possibility. Here's a rundown of some of the big names in Georgia politics that could eventually take over key cabinet positions. The first is Raphael Bostic, president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Politico reports he's being considered for Treasury Secretary. That would be a history-making appointment, as only white men have ever held that position. He would replace Steve Mnuchin, who has held the position since 2017. So the next position under consideration is Attorney General of the United States. Sally Yates is a possible contender here. She's the former U.S. Attorney in the Northern District of Georgia, and if selected, she would replace William Barr. Yates was fired by President Trump in 2017 when she was serving as the acting Attorney General. She refused to enforce the administration's travel ban that barred immigrants from 7 majority Muslim countries from entering the United States. And once under consideration for Joe Biden's vice president, Politico says Atlanta Mayor Keisha Bottoms could now be considered for a cabinet position. She's a contender for the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, a position that Ben Carson holds as of now. And finally, Politico reports that a Georgia Tech professor is under consideration for Secretary of Energy. Professor Elizabeth Sherwood Randall is the former Deputy Secretary of Energy. If selected, she would take over for Dan Broilette.